After engaging in what many viewed as an embarrassing display of hubris in her attempt last fall to issue executive orders attacking the right to keep and bear arms and ammunition, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, the Democrat, backed off the orders. But her hubris seems to remain, as last week she fought for the orders in the New Mexico Supreme Court and engaged in another bold attack. That's right, Michelle Lujan Grisham Friday announced a new load of rights-attacking proposals that she says will be heard in a special 30-day session of the state legislature starting this week. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV, and here's the story. Andrea Vacchiano reports for Fox News, quote, New Mexico Republicans are accusing Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham of undermining the Second Amendment after the Democrat introduced gun control proposals on Friday. Lujan Grisham announced that a 30-day state legislative session is slated to begin Tuesday that will include the largest and most comprehensive public safety package in our state's history. Funny, but pointing government guns at peacefully minded people who want to own or do own certain kinds of firearms, telling them they can't exercise their right to acquire a means of self-defense, or telling them that they must wait and produce private information, giving it to agents of the state, well, those don't make the peacefully minded people any safer. As FBI uniform crime statistics going back many years show, there's a strong correlation between increasing legal gun ownership and decreasing violent crime. And as regions with heavy anti-gun statutes show, the so-called bans don't stop guns from reaching the criminals who want them. Quote, the gun control proposals include a 14-day background check waiting period on gun purchases, prohibiting guns in polling places and parks, and a minimum age requirement of 21 years on semi-automatic firearm purchases. Over and above the continued use of the amorphous term semi-automatic, which doesn't really mean anything other than the fact that a gun is not automatic, we have to note that none of these bills is in any way constitutional. They are all highly immoral threats by people in government against other people who would like to peacefully arm themselves. Meaning that Governor Grisham and those who propose these bills actually are the people engaging in threats of gun violence, state-held, tax-fed gun violence against innocent, rights-blessed individuals. But they seem not to care about rights, and instead want to work within the already fictive legal land that generations of disrespectful, deceitful politicians have constructed since FDR cronies passed the 1934 Firearms Act. And they seem to think that one of their most promising vectors of attack will be opening new doors to civil lawsuits against gun makers. Get this, writes Vacchiano, quote, the package also includes the Firearm Industry Accountability Act, which would amend the state statute SIC to allow gun manufacturers to be held liable for deceptive trade practices. This indicates that Grisham and her gang have actually read the 2005 Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA, which prohibits federal courts from hearing interstate liability suits against gun makers and sellers should the firearms be used in violent criminal acts. It's a statute that many Republican members of Congress passed because of the looming threat of spurious attempts to bankrupt gun makers for so-called liability if their product actually didn't malfunction, but instead, if it worked properly in the hands of a criminal. with only a few exceptions, such as if the seller knowingly sold the firearm to someone who had signaled an intent to use the product for criminal purposes. The default position would be blockage from federal courts by this Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act of almost all liability suits against gun makers. But as the leftist anti-gun rights Gifford Center tells its visitors, there are a few ways to skirt the statute, and that seems to be Grisham's vector of attack. Quote, generally, PLCAA, says the Gifford Center, prohibits plaintiffs from bringing what the law calls qualified civil liability actions against these industry defendants. Qualified civil liability actions are civil or administrative proceedings for damages or other relief brought by any person, including a governmental entity, resulting from the criminal or unlawful misuse of firearms, ammunition, or firearm or ammunition component parts by the plaintiff or a third party. Importantly, PLCCA provides 6 exceptions to its general industry immunity. And one of those is, folks, an action in which a manufacturer or seller of a qualified product knowingly violated a state or federal statute applicable to the sale or marketing of the product if the violation was a proximate cause of the harm for which relief is sought. So it seems like Grisham and her gang want to attack the right to sell or obtain a firearm by threatening gun makers over what they say when they market the guns. But unless a gun malfunctions, the result of its use shouldn't place the maker in any sort of liability danger. To do so would be akin to claiming that a car maker could be liable for advertising its product and not including in said advertisement a warning that someone might use the vehicle in a hit and run. Vacchiano offers words from Grisham that indicate an utter lack of care for this reality. Quote, the constitutionality questions are beginning to be very complicated in the arena of gun violence, Lujan Grisham said at a press conference Friday. We are going to continue this effort following what is going on around the country. Perhaps Lujan Grisham isn't up to speed on the matter of the Second Amendment, but constitutionality questions, well, they're not complicated at all. They're very easily answered, spelled out by the Second Amendment's phrase, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To avoid embarrassing herself again, Grisham might want to stop pushing pretenses. She might want to steer away from threatening gun makers and buyers with new openings to fatuous liability suits or government prohibitions and waiting periods. And she might want to recognize that those themselves are infringements on natural rights. Perhaps she knows she won't succeed. Perhaps she's pushing all of this simply to get applause from her leftist base. And perhaps, as we noted earlier, she can't feel embarrassment at all because she's so toweringly hubristic, she will continue to march along her bellicose path, threatening peaceful people all the way. Many options there. It's difficult to figure that lady out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget, sometimes they censor us, so we recommend that people hop over to Rumble and follow us there. Thank you so much for being the audience at Rumble, and thank you, Rumble, for sticking up for free speech. If you want to find out what the whole team is doing anytime, head to MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org. While you're there, please visit the MRC Store and consider donating to the Media Research Center. You can also find us inside Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, and on Twitter/X. And on Twitter/X, I'm at Gard Goldsmith. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.